impression gets around about poets that they're gentle, retiring, extremely sensitive, extremely introverted souls. Now, I have never met a gentle, retiring, extremely sensitive, extremely introverted, at least to outward appearances, poet in my life. Now, naturally, to be a good poet, you have to be sensitive, but it's not the kind of sensitivity is generally referred to. That is, it is not sensitive at being easily put down. It's at sensitive at noticing things, being sensitive to the feelings of other people. Now, I will sing you a little song which will sort of illustrate the state of my psyche. In politics, I'm radical and enemy of the wicked. I ruin the careers of those who think that is stupid. But I'm kind. Deep in my heart, I'm kind. Why do I always have to be proving a reputation? Bright moon, oh, if I could live like my spaniel, to whom all things are urgent and simple. If not simple, nowhere. If my nerves drank my desires as hers do, maybe I could stick up one mysterious finger and sign the moon as an artist might. You know, the whole class I went to school with was practically killed off in the war. One of my schoolmates, George McLeod, I remember particularly because he interrupted the teacher one time and argued that if it hadn't been for the rebellion of 1837, we'd all be slaves. This fellow was sent out in a Lancaster night bomber in daylight to face those, Japanese Zeros that were supposed to be inferior imitations of Allied planes. Well, of course, he didn't come back, which was hardly to be expected. And so on down the list. Most of the class was wiped out. What made me such a fiercely class-conscious person was that I lived on the margin between the middle class and the working class, and friends in both classes. And I was able to compare the personalities of the two classes. I found the working class, as far as I was concerned, was way on top. If a working class kid was your friend, he was your friend, and there was no doubt about it. If a middle class kid was your friend, he was only your friend up to a certain point. If you wanted him to watch your back in a tough scene, he wasn't your friend. This is the secret of my class consciousness.
My mother goes in slippers, and her weight thumps the floor. But when I think of her, I think of one smile when she was young, and to me was a goddess of green age, though now I remember her young, with hair red as a blossom. I remember the whole room full of that smile, and myself scampering across the edges. Now she lives on cigarettes and wine, goes from potted plant to flower, knowing the time and manner of each one's tending.
He was a very, very delicate child. Something happened to him when he was 3, and he went down. He was 4, you could see through him. They said he wouldn't live till he was 5, and then if he lived till he was 7, he might have a chance. And this went on, so from the time he was able to hold a pencil, he started to write. And he had this younger brother, and he used to make up the stories to him every night and tell them to him, you see. I do like his nature poems the best. I don't care an awful lot for political ones, although I can see there's an awful lot of truth in them, and he's usually about 20 years ahead. I try to encourage him, and I like the poems he writes when he's on the shore and when he's observing the birds and, flowers.
Sometimes it's all I can do to keep from crying. Oh, my love for you is all I can do to keep from crying.
There's one characteristic of his. He couldn't stand to see the slightest thing hurt. An animal, a frog, anything, And for all he's so very, very strong, he wouldn't want to hurt anybody. He's a wonderful son. He gets excited, walks up and down and rants over things, but when you get to know him, it doesn't mean a thing, Especially when he reads the newspaper. But good, no, sir, he is kind and generous.
An old doctor with gutted cheeks, time arrested in the used-up knuckled hands crossed on his lap, sits in a spell of the glinting water. He dreams of times in the cider sunlight when mass stood up like stubble, but now a gull cries, lights, flounces its wings ornately, folds them, and the waves slop among the weed-grown piles. Well, this is a sample of a folk style which was prevalent in the 19th century, early 20th. I never heard of it. It never gave me maritime poems to read in school. Damn few Canadian ones. It was the schooner Blue Goose sailing in a race. The captain had sold his country's honor in Canada's small disgrace. The Yankees who had bought him say, and many say they're right, you can always buy the champion if you can't win the fight. But when the Yankees started to pass, the Goose's one-armed mate had uttered a most poetic oath that froze the captain tight. For no one is supposed to curse in a schooner under sail unless he is the captain or doing the captain's will. That, I'm told, it may be a joke, but anyway, everyone froze in poses like a picture, each pointing with his nose. You can guess which way. The mate threw a right hick hook that crushed the Yankee plan, for no one can hit harder than a one-armed sailing man. It is the rule of a one-armed man. If he's got blood to brew, he'll do more work with that one arm than other men can with two. The schooner Blue Goose won that race, won it by several tacks, won that race with the captain lying unconscious on deck. Afterwards, the captain went to the mate, said, though I lost my bet, I'll forget the whole thing if you will also forget. What would the first mate say? The law is rigid as hell. When you are sailing, clause after clause, you obey the captain's will. They have such rules over most of the earth, even when there's no reason. Drive it to you twice as hard when there are facts to seize on. The captain remained famous, his opinions quoted often. The sea is not what it used to be. Men had started to soften since the unions entered the rule, each seaman on his own, with no consideration but the fact of master and man. But I'll tell you another fact. That captain was laid full length by a one-armed first mate who made his weakness strength, who was no individual tough, but a rat, and for the Union. You've got to reckon with men like him if you say this country's done.
Milton landed on the coast from the east like a breath of fresh air, right in the middle, right at the beginning of the poetry renaissance in Vancouver. Everybody was just starting to write. George Barring and Red and, well, Bobby Hogue, the whole Tisch group had begun. And Milton was a famous poet to most of these people. I mean, to them he was, like he had 2 or 3 books published, or he had a big book published by Contact Press, the best press in Canada, and he was exciting and novel, and he was constantly starting things, never finishing them. I don't know. He started everything. Everything in Vancouver began and ended with Milton Acorn. He knew everybody. He seemed to show up everywhere. He was a member of the Trotskyists. He was a member of every radical sort of political organization in the city. He went to every reading. He put total life into Vancouver for about 2 or 3 years. I learned to sort of love him. Milton would do outrageous things, like things that everybody else would do. Like they were building a new fountain in Vancouver, and they had this fence up around it, and that was when they were doing these fence paintings all over Vancouver. And Milton printed up his Muhammad Ali poem, which was a great sort of rhetorical, political pieces on Muhammad Ali, the great black hope sort of a thing, you know. He went downtown and got himself a soapbox and stood up in this soapbox and screamed out the Muhammad Ali poem, selling it for 10 cents a copy, just cheap mimeograph sheets. But no other poet in town would have had the guts to do it. Milton would read in front of, like, just the people on the street, you know. And if they laughed at him, he could put them down, you know, scream right back at them, bang out with another poem, like he'd go, I shall love! And this guy would just, like, be totally put down on the street. And he sold his poems. Fantastic poems. These are like the comparable Canadian poems, I think, to Ginsberg, without the intellect, with just like the sheer sort of emotional joy that Milton can, you know, come out with. And The Elephant's 5-Pound Brain, which is probably the greatest humorous poem ever written in Canada, you know? I mean, it's the funniest goddamn thing I've ever heard when Milton reads it. I want to get him to read it today. I mean, I absolutely will. I'd love to stand there and read it with him. He goes on and on and on and builds and builds. Just beautiful.
In the elephant's 5-pound brain, the wind is the birth of the draughts of his breath. Rivers are sweet gulps, and the ocean, after a certain distance, is too deep for wading. The earth is trivial, it has the shakes, and must be severely tested, else it'll crumble into unsteppable clumps and scatter off, leaving the great beast bellowing among the stars.
In the elephant's 5-pound brain, dwarves have an incredible... I think the figure of the man, is sort of the whole stance, and the face and everything, you know, because he's probably one of the most beautiful people in the world, you know. And I think he scares people, but he draws them to him, you know. It's like, if there's anything like having an aura around your body, I think Milton's is probably 2 or 3 blocks. If only once he could descend to trivialities, he'd sweep the whole earth clean of his tormentors in one sneeze so mighty as to be observed from Mars.
In the elephant's 5-pound brain, sun and moon are the pieces in a delightfully complex ball game that have to do with him.
Milton Acorn is a Canadian poet who's been publishing his poetry since about 1956 in anthologies and collections. The latest collection is called I've Tasted My Blood, and he's in the studio now. Mr. Acorn, you used to be a carpenter. That's what you were when you started out and got as far as Montreal, being a carpenter.
Yeah, I went to work first, start as a laborer in various jobs. Then I went into the civil service, but after 2 or 3 years, I decided it was not my bag, and so I learned a trade and went at it. I also had sort of the idea that I was going to do quite a bit of writing.
What was it that made you decide to be a full-time poet?
Well, it was sort of forced on me. At one time, I had a disastrous marriage, a nervous breakdown, and reached the point where I couldn't do anything else but write poetry. Then I got quite serious about it and improved quite a bit. In fact, within 2 years of that decision, I noticed a peculiar attitude amongst young poets towards me, and all of a sudden realized I was considered the poetic establishment. At this time, I had not made one red-cent poetry.
This is when you met Al Purdy?
Yeah, around about that time, yes.
And I gathered that he had a lot to do with your quitting carpentry.
It's true he had a lot to do with me eventually specializing in poetry. I had a job with the CN Express, and Purdy came out and practically dragged me by the scruff of his neck down to Ameliasburg and said, now you'll be a poet.
I met Milton about 15 years ago in Montreal. This guy knocks on my door, and he says Irving Layton sent him. And he says I can give him some tips on writing radio plays. So anyway, Milton comes in, and we drink coffee, and we get some beer, and we drink that, and, we get to be pretty good friends for I don't know what reason. I don't know what reason friends ever get to be good friends. But about a year later, Milton decides he's going to sell his carpenter tools and make his living writing. And Milton, old boy, I said, don't do it. Even a great writer like me can't make a living writing. But Milt, insisted, so I went with him to the pawn shop on, where the hell was it? Craig Street, I guess it was, where he sold those tools. He came down here, by the way, and started to help me put in the rafters up above. And all I can say is that my earlier judgment is completely wrong. Milton should have sold those carpenter tools. Had to rip all the rafters out and put them in all over again. Well, actually, I think Milton has always been a friend of mine. I think he always will be a friend of mine. Not an easy friend. I've quarreled with him all my life, and I expect to go. I disagree with him on just about every damn thing I can think of.
I left these parties and criticized them because personal conversations with you, because there was only one that I left and publicly condemned, and that was the Trotskyites.
Okay, but I'm just saying that you are not hewing to any party line, that a good poet rises above or below all of these things of party lines of a particular ideology. We're all humanists. We all want to see a better world. We all take a particular way to a better world. We say this maybe is the best. But in your poetry, all I see is a good poet, as apart from a communist. Now, if you deny that you're a good poet.
Oh, why would I be writing poetry?
I just kind of like the question, Mill.
Good, Al.
Milton at his best is he approaches greatness, and I believe this. I think Milton at his best approaches greatness.
Yeah, so what?
He was writing poems that talked about people in a way that I don't think anybody else did at all. For instance, he talked about people, he talked about things in such a direct way, in such a remarkable, evocative way that I don't think anybody could equal him at that time. You know, since I'm island born, Holmes is precise as if a mumbly old carpenter, shoulder straps crossed wrong, laid it out, refigured to the last 3/8 of a shingle. I think that's a brilliant piece of writing, and I think also that the business about the miner who was put to work at a dangerous job and fell off into a deep pit in the mine. And now on the late shift, the drill I'm bucking bangs his name in code, Callum. But where the island is, I'll never know. The sound of a jackhammer is epitaph for a miner. I think it's great. So, obviously, my opinion of Milt as a poet is of the very highest.
I always was a Canadian poet, and made no mistake and never attempted to deny it. And all of a sudden, it seemed to have a very bad character. I'm a Canadian nationalist. Well, I'm not a Canadian nationalist. I'm a Canadian patriot. And to put it more briefly, this implies the same thing, a Canadian.
And it'll be presented by someone who needs very little introduction, by Milton Acorn, well-known poet, other poets in the country, and all the other people as the people's poet.
Well, when I first saw Milton Acorn's poems around 1957, 1958, I was impressed by their rough-fisted quality. There was a strength and an energy to them which startled me and delighted me. And it was the combination of strength and tenderness, a very genuine lyricism, that made me feel that here was a true Canadian original poet. Milton has kept that rough-fisted, proletarian, common folk quality, along with a great tenderness and compassion, sympathy, and lyricism. It is this that gives a unique flavor to Milton's poetry.
In the thief's mind's eye, our bright places are photographed gray, and our darknesses ways lit by his narrow, intense want. The conjurer, too, knows figures in our vision, and there slips his deuces, discovers rabbits. For it's by our needs we explore, and only become aware of shadows when there's already a little light. Scientists have been hoodwinked by an old black-shawled woman, despising her and unable to guess or believe that a room has extra corners a peasant can brood about and find before they. In Canada, a poet, to make his way as a poet, has to be a real tough bastard. The motto of Canada seems to be, what right have you? What right have you to your opinions? What right have you to be this, be that, choose this, choose that? What right have you to be a Canadian? I say I have a perfect right to be a Canadian and anything else I desire to be.
I swear I feel something of the poet's exaltation, though lately I've been leaning my head out of the window to cry. I spun you out of my eyes' fire. It wasn't you, but my desire for the pure vein of silver running there, even if not mine, even if not mine.
I love you and I love loneliness. The loneliness I love is you. Here by the gray tongue sea, you 3 days gone. Your absence and return are both you. A prof once told me that dialectics contradicts every mathematical law. Where you are, where I am, it must be admitted love does too. For each of us is added to with nothing taken. Fire leaves fire instead of ashes. New kinds of fire, exchange without exchange.
Come all your hardy sons of toil, pray lend an ear to me, whilst I relate the dismal state of this our fair country. I will not pause to name the cause, but keep it close in view. For comrades grieve when they must leave, and bid this I'll do.
If this brain's over-tempered, consider that the fire was want and the hammers were fists. I've tasted my blood too much to love what I was born to. Playmates, I remember where their skulls rolled. One died hungry, 9 gray porch planks. One fell and landed so hard he splashed. And many come up atom by atom in the worm casts of Europe. My deep prayer a curse. My deep prayer the promise that this won't be. My deep prayer my cunning, my love, my anger, and often even my forgiveness, that this won't be and be. I've tasted my blood too much to abide what I was born to.
That's right.